Hello and welcome everybody. This is Pan McDonald, the Chief People and Culture Officer for SCS. We're really excited to welcome the 2022 20 under 35 cohort. The concept of outside in is something very close to our heart. It's on our DNA. We actually dream of a world where the concept won't even exist, where people won't be feeling that they're outside needing to be invited to come into our industry or into our environment. We're working around the clock for that. It's part of what we believe and breathe and do. We go to high schools to start very early. We have women cohorts and STEM programs. We're working with special programs for what considered to be too old to be in our industry, programs over 55. We are passionately believing on transferability of skills, so people can be of any age, any background, any industry, and feel that they can come on our exciting trip on the space industry and with our company and build that future together. So excited to support the program, and welcome to all the 2022 20 under 35 cohort.
My name's Sabrina. I'm from London, but I'm based in Luxembourg, and I currently work for SES Satellites. I have I guess my journey in space started in my bachelor's, where I studied theoretical physics, made my way to the International Space University, made my way to NASA, then ESA, and then eventually landed in SES, where now I head up our space sustainability department and also program manage ESG, so environmental social governance. So I would say I very much specialize in the sustainability area, and I absolutely love what I do. I think there's so many cool aspects to it. And also I wanted to say thanks for the opportunity to be here, and looking forward to chatting with you all throughout this session.
My name is Robert Hawkins. I work at Boeing. I work in the modeling and analysis org for end-to-end systems. No particular specialty, just kind of everything in the kind of satellite-ish world. Jump around a lot of places.
My name is Joachim Espeland. I'm the CEO and co-founder of QuadSat. I'm a Norwegian, but building the company here in Denmark.
So my name is Saroj, and I'm a mission designer for advanced propulsion systems at the University of Alabama in Huntsville. And I support NASA Marshall's Spaceflight Center on nuclear thermal propulsion program. And simultaneously, I'm also pursuing my PhD, hoping to graduate this year. So yeah, and it's wonderful to meet you guys.
I am Dr. Vivek Muralidharan. I'm a research associate at the University of Luxembourg. So yeah, as it suggests, I am currently based in Luxembourg, Europe.
So my name is Mariam Nassim. I'm currently based in Washington, D.C., and I am a PhD student in planetary science at the University of Maryland, College Park.
My name is Angga. I'm currently working as a head of product development and management in Telkom Satellite Indonesia. Telkom Satellite Indonesia is the biggest satellite company in Indonesia.
My name is James Spicer. I work for Kepler Communications US, and I live in San Francisco.
I'm Nathan. I currently work at KBR with the NASA Johnson Space Center. In this role, I support one of the largest contracts with the business operations and financial analysis side. Since I have a background that's in both economics and in space studies, I'm definitely hoping to pivot more towards a macroscopic scale of things in my future career. And again, it's very nice to see everyone here.
So I'm Jenna Tawana. I'm part of iSpace Europe, and I am Senior Business Development and Strategy Advisor.
Hi, I'm Anthony Yoon. I'm based in Boston. I currently work as a consultant at McKinsey & Company. My background, I'm a mechanical and space engineer, and then I became a physician, and I practiced for about 10 years clinically in emergency space with a little bit of interest in space medicine and space life sciences. So very nice to be here.
Hi, this is Tamara Bond-Williams, and I am SSPI Director of Engagement. I am so excited to have this opportunity to introduce to you members of the 2022 20 under 35 cohort. This group of young professionals is as they are every year. Simply amazing. A fascinating and well-rounded mix of people who have careers as engineers, entrepreneurs, business development people, medical people. We've got all kinds of people in the cohort this year. And so it is fitting that the topic we chose to discuss this year is called Outside In, which explores all the ways that people who are currently outside or might think of themselves as being outside of our industry can be invited in. Whether that entails being ethnically, by ethnicity or by nationality or by race, gender, orientation, or also it might be by career path, career skills. What can we do to make our industry more attractive and more inviting to those who are traditionally considered on the outside? With that, I am pleased to introduce you to members of the 2022 20 under 35 cohort. Let's get at it. I'm going to do a thing, and I'm just going to ask your reactions. So I'm going to share my screen. Let's see, here we go. I want to show you, so I don't know if you've noticed my background, but my background is actually AI generated. And these are some of the earlier iterations of my attempt to generate something for a background for this event. So I just want you to take a quick look at it and just get your impressions. I want to tell you that the prompts were to have a door open at a 45-degree angle with light emanating therefrom and some sort of industrial manufacturing on the inside, and groups of people, diverse people coming in, include everybody, include all nationalities, et cetera, et cetera. So this was the prompt that I gave the AI, and this was its first attempt at responding to that prompt. Okay, so that was its first try. And so my question is, of course, who does AI think represents diverse people? Okay, that was my first question. Okay, this was another attempt that I thought was amazingly well done. It was like a very futuristic kind of a rocket, et cetera. And I looked at this picture for a good long time, and then I said, where are the women? Now, as you can see, I have some questions about what AI thinks represents diversity. And I just want to hear your reactions to my poor attempt at being an AI artist. So anybody's welcome to join in.
Yeah, I mean, I think the issue is that AI will represent things of what the source material is. And unfortunately, even at this day and age, I think we still find that level of representation generally from the material that is available does skew tremendously. And that's why, and I think your results in AI is a reflection of that. I thought it was nice that in your bottom right picture that was generated, that there was somebody in a wheelchair. And I think that represents that type of diversity. But truly, most of the people there in those images, I would say 90% plus is definitely represented as a male. It's hard to see what, racial background they are, or even like international background there is. And maybe that's because it was selected. But I think that certainly is representative of what we truly see out there, and that we need to really actually do a better job on is that representations.
Yeah, I completely agree with Anthony, in terms of when you see the diversity, I don't think the pictures depicted, what it should be. And exactly, it scouts the information from the internet on its own and then sees, what profile, do people actually imagine and what the reality is, even though, So, and the only other interesting thing was most of the pictures, I mean, like I could see the rockets being depicted. I mean, like, although I mean, like that's only a fraction of, I mean, like the space industry in general. I mean, like I'm happy about it because when it shows rockets, because I work on the rockets. And the other factor, what I also see, I mean, like beyond the AI, is that space industry is not very open with respect to the other industries, if I may say, and it's highly government regulated, which restricts the companies. I mean, like not just the government organizations, but companies also, and like to restrict, I mean, like people from diverse background, and like especially internationals, I mean, like which, for example, what I've faced, I mean, like coming from India, I mean, like over here, I mean, like sometimes the laws are framed in such a way that even though I mean, like the companies would want to hire you, they cannot, depending upon some of the regulations. And when you go, I mean, like in the industries outside, I mean, like for example, a kid, I mean, like born, I mean, like in a developing country, which might not have its own dedicated space agency in its own country. So where does the kid actually go? And like if it has to, I mean, like explore outside, then the doors are actually shut. And within the country, I mean, like not every country has its own space exploration program. So yeah, and I think once we have much more diverse programs, I mean, like all across the country, all over the world, I think then the AI will then start picking up the same information that, hey, this is how the world is actually changing. So I'll be interested to see, I mean, like how the AI can actually see over the years how the space industry has been. I mean, like, does it depict the same picture, or it's you see, I mean, like there's a variation from, for example, 1960s, I mean, like until today. So yeah.
I mean, agree with everyone. I do think that it kind of represents a wider problem in two different aspects. I think one, look at the people who program this, look at the people behind the work there. If their tools and instrumentation are going to think similar to them, I mean, of course, you're going to get this lack of kind of representation in what comes out in the outcome. But it actually goes back to the points made, which is, yes, the space industry isn't diverse. And it is part of a wider problem, because if you have one set of people continuously always making the decisions and are going to hire the same set of people, things will not move and things will not change. And diversity will always be seen in their eyes and will always be seen from their perspective rather than what diversity actually is. And what I see there is an attempt at diversity, but not inclusion. And inclusion actually goes beyond just putting people who look different and people who have different attributes in one room. And it's actually making them feel safe, making them feel part of a bigger picture. So I think those kind of aspects are addressed in that. And also, I don't think the inclusion part, which is also very important, is kind of acknowledged as well. So yeah, my 2 pennies worth.
Yeah, I agree with you, Sabrina. And just to add to that, right, there's something systematic that's unique within the space industry against that, right? Just to kind of add to the point of what Saraj said, you know, especially in the US, like hiring in the space industry is very different to other industry in the US, right? I come from healthcare, and 40 to 50% are international people that they hire each year as physicians. But in space, they don't hire international because of ITAR and other regulations. So there's this whole barrier there that exists that are specific to this industry. I think I was just recently at Symposium, and the one of the executives from Blue Origin was saying, yeah, we have 14,000 people. We have exactly one non-American, one out of 14,000. And so I think that tells you the scale is like that there is like, you know, systemic industrial kind of barriers there that, you know, needs to be addressed.
Definitely agree with all the different points over here. And something else that was really interesting to consider when looking at the picture was how it seems like they're all relatively the same age. I think it depends, but in at least at Johnson Space Center, a lot of the employees and team members here are definitely towards the late stage of their careers, with the average age being at 56 or 57. And in my opinion, diversity also includes age, and also like the picture could help us, if the picture showed like there's new people who are coming in with new perspectives, fresh out of school, whether it be undergrad or graduate programs, new employees will definitely have different things to consider and to bring on from what they have just learned. A lot of times, the older employees who have been working in industry for 40 years, 50 years, also have that wealth of knowledge and experience gained from working in shuttle, or even back in the days when the space race was still hot. And of course, we have the mid-career ages, which allows us to bridge between these two gaps. The mid-career era may be out of school long enough so that they've gained a lot of experience, but then they might be pursuing their MBAs, or they also might be able to interact and bridge between these two different generations to make sure that everyone can share their thoughts, whether it be from experiences gained from working for 20 years at NASA, or whether it be from working just 2 years and right out of college.
One thing that at least I don't see are people from diverse educational backgrounds. A lot of what I see, at least in my work, are people that have been in aerospace their whole career, and aerospace is more of an exporter of people. I see a lot of coworkers that leave and they go to, one of the big software companies or car manufacturing or something like that. I generally don't see a lot of people that come into aerospace with different backgrounds. It's aerospace, it's mechanical, it's software, electrical. I generally don't see that. And maybe this is a prompt you have later that you kind of alluded to, but bringing people in from outside the industry inside, I think traditionally aerospace has been, kind of old school aerospace has been very risk averse, high reliability kind of things. And that really goes counter to a lot of things that a lot of industries, other than maybe medical devices and a handful of others, where they don't need that. They're not looking for that. That's too cost prohibitive. And maybe aerospace still has a little bit of a reputation for being a bit bureaucratic in that sense, and kind of puts people off because they see it as not really innovating, because we're so far behind, because we want high TRL, we want high reliability, and maybe that kind of puts people off on changing career paths and coming into aerospace.
Yeah. I really appreciate all your comments, because you've managed to touch on so many aspects of the question, right? And the reason I led with that AI picture is just because the immediate thing that came to my mind was the assumptions that are kind of prevalent in society are what are reflected in the AI, right? So we assume that space and manufacturing and so forth and so on are going to be men, largely white men. And so that's just kind of a prevalent baseline assumption. And so we're frequently express surprise and amazement and happiness to see something other than that, like, as opposed to that being the norm, right? The challenge with that is that it doesn't make it feel welcoming to be something other than, right? You don't feel welcome if you're the surprise. And so I had some interest in what you were saying, Sabrina, about that sense of inclusion, creating a sense of inclusion. And I had some interest also in this idea that we are an industry that does so many exciting and interesting things, but we are, in fact, as you said, Robert, exporters of talent, as opposed to importers of talent. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on how do we create that sense of inclusion?
Well, I would say that, AI is being trained on our data. These are inputs that we've generated as a civilization. So it goes to show our inherent bias and what, humanity thinks should be the representative population in such settings. And it's a real shame because things are shifting. We are trying to work towards more inclusion. And I think what you're seeing in these images might have been representative of a past era, but today in these settings, especially in the space sector, companies are looking to build out workforces that are more representative of the greater human population. but clearly like it hasn't really pervaded into mass consciousness, because otherwise why would this AI be spitting out these very generic images? So there's a lot of work to do, I think, and in working towards more, you know, initiatives for workforce and capacity development and promoting that, you know, this is not what the composition should look like, and we are trying to make changes.
That's interesting. So in our company, we're now 29 people working, and we are 19 different nationalities in our company.
Wow.
So and we're based in Denmark, and I think a lot comes from starting out with an international mindset. The satellite industry, the space industry, is an international industry. So there's nothing that kind of says everybody needs to be from Denmark. We should be speaking Danish in the company. These kind of things, right? So I was myself international. My co-founder was international, and in this way we went at an international line at the university, right? Which also brings a lot of different nationalities. So I think that has helped building a very international mindset from the beginning, and we knew our company language was going to be or was English. Anybody can speak any language, of course, as they want to go around. But it took a very long time until we had our first Danish employee, actually. And, wow. And we're still mostly, we're not intentionally hiring for international. It's not something that we've said we're only going to hire international. We're hiring the best person on the application that we think fit. So it's not something that we're trying to weigh out or oh, there's another flag in the pot. We have a flag with we have a pot with all the flags. So but however, one thing that has been challenging for us is we're working in the space industry, aerospace industry, aerospace and space. So we do drones for radio frequency test measurement and these kind of things. So it's a very, if you go to university in both aerospace and especially radio frequency, you will find very, very few females, for example. So that's also represented in our company. You will come into our company, you will see there's more guys than gals in that sense. And that's of course something that we would want to have more diversity in gender, but it can be really difficult to find and fill those roles.
I would say like even before the AI, ChatGPT, and all these things came out, like for example, if you had Google like what an engineer looks like, it's more or less like people in yellow cap, like construction worker sites. That's the ones that would show up on Google Images. But then a lot of us are engineers, but we may never have even worn a yellow cap, So it's very difficult to understand, it's what is currently like fed in the database that it has, because like AI or Google just generates ideas based on what it's fed in the database. But of course, the database can be made more elaborate because, as you mentioned, like one of the images did not have a woman in it. And so looking at diversity, it has multiple aspects. It can be diverse in terms of gender, of course. It can be diverse in terms of people in different domains. You can have like people who are working on computers, you can work people on space, you can have people on like different aspects, different professions. And you can also have like diversity in terms of people of different nationalities and race. So that's also something. And I would think that, like in the coming future, when we think of AI and solutions being generated by AI, I would imagine the database is being updated based on all these factors taken into account. So only then we'll get a truly diverse understanding or pictures, for example.
Of course, these models, I don't know how, really I'm not an expert on how they're developed or how they're trained or anything, of course, as we see, there's a way to go when it comes to making these models reflect diversity in a more accurate way. And it's not perfect yet, obviously. You know, I'm probably not the best person to be speaking on topics of diversity, you know, as a white man, of course, but obviously there's a lot of different things that go into it, and I think there's a lot of progress being made, but of course still a long way to go.
The topic here is outside in, right? And so we're exploring all the ways that people are on the outside and that, you know, of our industry, and why are they on the outside, and how do we invite them in, and what kinds of outside are we talking about, right? And so, of course, gender is one dimension of outside that we can talk about, and race or ethnicity is another. I want to push slightly back, James, and maybe controversially. You are absolutely a person who should be speaking on this topic. You know, first of all, I want to articulate an idea that contradicts the idea of white normativeness, right? Like, why should that be the norm and therefore exclude white people, so-called white people, because I'm very unattached to racial concepts specifically, but why should you be excluded from a conversation? You are an aspect of human diversity also. I'm not the diversity, we are all the diversity. So I really wanna just kind of broaden our horizons a little bit and give us an opportunity to think about, you know, what happens when we have this kind of shared, I'm going to call it a shared hallucination of what reality actually is, right? What happens with that, and what are the negative, or, well, I think they're mostly negative. What are the outcomes of having a shared hallucination?
Of course, yes, I agree that, you know, I shouldn't be excluding myself from this conversation at all. Everybody is a big part of diversity and helping to make what is historically a not very diverse industry into, you know, one that better reflects all aspects of society. And yes, I think the aerospace industry, as we all know, you know, is historically probably one of the least diverse industries, and you know, I don't have a magical fix on you know, how to make it better overnight. It's going to take years and decades of progress, and I think it's certainly much more diverse now than it was, you know, 5, 10, 20 years ago, etc.
I would say that this change is probably over the last decade or so, where we're seeing more diverse cohorts of individuals with different backgrounds and different ethnicities and different expertise entering the sector. It wasn't always historically the case. I think our astronaut programs, the governmental astronaut programs, are kind of reflective of this as well. If you look at mission control back in the 60s, very few women, lots of, you know, representation of white men. And that shift is happening gradually over time. I think we need more data. I mean, I know you talked about how do we have a better representation of this data, but I think we actually need to create more data. We need to have, you know, more opportunities, more people, more inclusion, and then the data will begin to speak for itself. I think we're still in that phase of working towards that critical mass, which is why we don't really see it in the public consciousness yet.
Even with the kind of ways the space industry is changing, I don't think we're really looking at change at that level, because again, all the funding goes to a certain type of people. Those companies, those really innovative organizations, the people at the top are, again, someone who fits a very small minority. Like there's this kind of demographic that is usually favored in many situations. So I think it's actually at the root of the problem. And I think that one of the ways, I mean, this is like my daily job. So this is why I'm like throwing it at you. But there are a few different areas to tackle. Firstly, if you want to get a diverse group of people, you have to show that your organization and the industry is open to that and actually makes people feel comfortable. A lot of the time, people feel that, oh, I've now got this opportunity, but actually they don't feel good about that opportunity because they're not sure if they're a token hire, they're not actually feeling part of their organization, they're not feeling safe, and they really do feel like they stick out like a sore thumb. That's the first thing. On the other hand, to get people inspired and to move in the industry, to get different types of thinking, we can't just go to universities when people already made their minds up. That's something we need to inspire all the way from when they're basically kids. It's proven that between the ages of 3 to 7, that's when people make up their minds about who they really want to be. And if we make more effort in tackling the right kind of people in the right setting, then great. But again, that doesn't provide much business value. So private companies don't then put effort into doing that. They go towards universities where they look at fresh hires in the short term.
I had a dream of becoming an astronaut at the age of 8. And, you know, between the 3 to 10, I mean, like age group, if the underrepresented groups, I mean, like can be supported well enough, rather than, you know, focusing diversity and inclusion only at the time of hiring, but also at the school level and younger level, so that you have fellowship programs or scholarships so that they learn and they become, they are technically and in terms of knowledge, they are on peer with everybody else. That then makes it much more easier for them to be included. I mean, like like, if you are talented, definitely, I mean, like you will not be ignored. I mean, like, but then I'm like, if you have not had a very successful, I mean, like path towards your education, I mean, then it becomes a lot more difficult. And that's where, I mean, like the tokenism or diversity hire, I mean, like labels are actually given. So to avoid that, I mean, like the only thing what I believe is that to support them when they are really young in terms of fellowships, scholarships, and make sure they are on par with everybody else.
I think internship programs should expand the number of slots available. Definitely when you're young and you're trying to get your feet in the door, having an internship that's at, for example, one of the space companies, whether it be a startup or a major place, can be very helpful in getting that network and building on that list of contacts. There's been, I live pretty close. I grew up in an area that was very close by Johnson Space Center. And I would always hear lots and lots of students applying for these internship programs. But the thing is that the internship programs are relatively small compared to the number of applicants that are out there. So many super qualified, really intelligent, and highly motivated students aren't accepted into these internships, not because they lack the qualifications or like the background, but just because there's like a cap to the number of people that can be taken on board. If we expand these internship programs and bring up more people with paid roles, that helps them get a sense, what is the space industry like, and how else can I go further into my university career and take what classes or get involved in what type of projects, so that when I look for a full-time job, I have the right skill sets to be hired by there.
Just want to chime in real quick. One thing that was kind of mentioned is making sure that people feel included when they're here. I know that doesn't help bring people into the industry, but one thing that I've noticed, particularly with people who maybe have been in the industry for 20 or 30 years or even more at the same company for 20 or 30 years, and they have a strong opinion about everything because everything they've done is kind of related, so they have a very strong opinion. One thing that we can do as more mid-level career people is make sure that the younger engineers make sure that they have a voice and make sure that they feel safe in expressing their opinions and sharing. That's one thing I try to do with my new hires, is make sure that they know that they have a voice. And maybe with the more senior engineers, when they try to tamp down on younger people speaking up, talking to them or pulling them aside and having that friendly conversation, because I think that does lead to people feeling excluded, and then they end up leaving the industry, and that's bad for everybody.
Let's tackle, again, the root of the problem. When you do have minorities joining companies, make them promotion plans, make them a pathway to get to senior levels. We talk about diversity, and all the time it's at junior level or mid-senior level, but never at high executive level, never at board level. And that's the diversity we should be aiming for. So actually, how do they reach that? Because right now they see it's unattainable. And so putting those plans in place, having training, giving them leadership opportunities, I think those are kind of the things that we can do, what we can do to tackle. And those are kind of, low hanging fruit. That's easy stuff that we can do, but requires a different way of thinking, which unfortunately people aren't prepared to do because it's not really been done effectively before. And it means kind of breaking down a system. But I don't see the success of kind of throwing new programs and initiatives on something that isn't accommodating in the first place. I think that we really need to look at the root cause and then work from there and build upwards and something new. And so innovation doesn't just have to be technology. It can be also the way we structure our processes. And that's something we need to focus on to achieve a new space industry, quite honestly.
I love to talk about the younger side. I think that's really important. But actually, I also wanted to kind of touch base on the other end too, right? Which Sabrina talked about, once you're in there, how do you become more inclusive? One thing I've observed a lot is that as you grow in your career, then, that growth is also, about who is your mentor and who is your sponsor. And I think there is a need from a culture change within the industry itself to be mindful of who we are supporting to advance and so forth. And this is actually not only the space industry. I think it is actually common to a lot of industry. Is this issue with gender diversity and backgrounds, but it really drops off in middle management. And really, that's why we see very few in senior leadership today who are the diversity that we're looking for or that we're hoping for. And so, how do you do that, right? How do you make it more inclusive? How do we support those people to grow? Is it people who are like them? But I think it's also bigger picture, right? The leadership of today's industry also needs to be supportive.
And Anthony, you made a good point, right? That this is not a problem unique to our industry. But if I may, there are some industries where I think it's super important to solve the problem, right? The medical industry is one, right? All the various ways that medical biases start creeping in are adverse to health, right? And I know you know this. Space has an aspiration for humanity, right? We have this aspirational vision of who we will be out in the future and what we will accomplish. And if we don't make sure that we are actively and aggressively including humanity, we won't. Constantly taking a pause and reflecting on where are we missing people? How do we bring them in? This has to be an intentional process as a startup. That it's not necessarily the most attractive proposition for people who are looking for very stable opportunities. So if they have to have a certain kind of a hunger and drive and maybe their own personal stability that they can jump in and participate in a startup. But that the people who were willing to come on, willing to be taking unpaid internships and so forth, now have great jobs, right? With a company that's succeeding. And I thought that was interesting because what was playing through my mind was the opportunity to expand the diversity of the industry by providing pathways forward for people who maybe are not starting out, either in technical fields or, but maybe if they had an into the organization and understood what the organization is, they could then craft learning and have internal learning within the company. Do you think that that's more easy for a startup company?
I think it's easier for a startup company, right? You define it as you go, and you set it up, and if you already have an established company with an established company culture, and we've seen toxic company cultures in several companies trying to change it, and it's a very, very difficult thing to do, because you need to replace a lot of people and a lot of processes and how things are done and so on, to do so. So I think that by starting out with international, or starting out with a focus that you want to have a diverse team, you want to have diverse capability, and you value that, right? Because ultimately all research, everything shows that diversity is good for everyone. So there's no doubt that you would want that especially as a startup or any innovative company, you want diversity.
I think it's really interesting because, when you were talking about bringing people into our industry, I think, so I went from working for a massive management consulting firm to iSpace, and obviously iSpace is like fairly high risk. We're doing lunar exploration. We're completely privately funded, like all a bit nuts. Just bought a house. I'm a bit like, oh God. But I think, as you said, it's because I'm passionate about it. But and I think that's fine. And for some people that is fine. But really, when you speak to the space industry, why a lot of people accept these, either it's a low salary or a risky job or unsustainable working hours, it's for the passion. And, to some extent, if we want our industry to progress faster, we need to bring just not super spacey nerds into the industry, and actually it be another industry to enter into. And I think this is a bit of an internal struggle the industry is dealing with, because on one hand, we're like, hey, we want to attract all different types of talent. But at the same time, we're seen as a really elitist industry. And I think some people like it being seen as an elitist industry. Like everyone is like, oh, it's more than astronauts and just scientists. But I think secretly everyone, or a lot of people, kind of love the fact that people are like, oh, it's rocket science. Like, it's not rocket science. And so I think the industry really has this internal battle between wanting to be accessible, but not too accessible, because then we will lose our status as the space industry. And it's something that we really need to crack and get over, because, having seen people like in my previous job that wasn't space at all, it was actually like all these different industries, space wasn't an attractive exit opportunity for them. And that's because either the salary wasn't there, or their skills that's not technical aren't really valued as that important at the moment, even though if you take them into the non-space world, they're seen as these fantastic investment bankers. The moment you bring that into the space industry, it's seen as, well, you're not CXO of this prime, so your experience is less relevant.
Robert, you mentioned a sense of bureaucracy, and I have a question about that, right? Because the industry is changing dramatically. There are so many startups, they're high risk environments, but a lot of innovative ideas. Is it changing because of all the startups? And is that change forcing some of the bigger companies like your own to change with it? Or is that legacy kind of the baseline of who we are, and does it need to change? I mean, that's a question. So over to you all. What do you think about how we create an environment that welcomes people?
Yeah, I'll jump in real quick because you called me out by name. I think, generally we do. We as an industry do need to continue to move forward. We're being shown by these startups and maybe not so mature companies that things don't have to be the way they have been for the last 40 years. You can bring in new ideas, and it's okay. You can disrupt the industry a bit. And you can look at SpaceX or one of the other many companies out there who are doing really great stuff, really interesting work. And they're out there succeeding. Things don't have to be, the way they've been. There are new ideas out there, and I hope that that's encouraging other people to come into the industry with their ideas, but how to create a sense of inclusion. I gotta chew on that one a little bit.
You know, sometimes you get surprised by what you don't know. And one thing that I didn't realize was how much seeing representation do matter. So I do have a 7-year-old, and she sees the world differently to how I see it, right? She tells me that, you know, that it's great to see, you know, that somebody who looks like her does things that she didn't realize that she can do in terms of career path and so forth. I think there was like one time we walked past in Manhattan, like a sign of like like a scientist who's female at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, and she was like, "Wow, that's really amazing." And so I don't realize that, and I think that's a very different way of seeing the world, right? Because I never thought of it from that point, but that's why you know the things that she interact with are like her dolls and like all of those things. Having those represented in the way that she can see herself actually does matter, and I never realized that. So I think like listening sessions like this is important because then you learn from people who are who want more, who are part of the solution, can offer some of these solutions that potentially we can all apply, right? And learning from each other, because I think people do see the world very differently.
One of the things that you said, Mariam, is that your attraction to our industry, and this is true for so many people, but I feel I'm of the opinion that we should amplify this message more and more, is through the arts, right? How many of us grew up with a vision of humanity that could be like Star Trek? And,
truly.
Right? The arts give us an opportunity to imagine a world that doesn't exist yet.
Absolutely, yes. I think it plays a really formative role, like the role of imagination and thinking like beyond what we can think today, because it creates a window of opportunity. The world can go in many directions. Like sci-fi there can be a lot of dystopian science fiction out there as well. And it's good to think about ways that, things could potentially end up if we don't take certain corrective measures today. But for example, Star Trek, I really like that message of optimism all the time. Things do go wrong, but I think the ethos is fundamentally grounded in, peaceful exploration, respect for diverse civilizations, cultures, religions, and I really appreciated that perspective. And I think, I've noticed like this rebranding now to STEAM, so science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And then just recently, because I helped organize the Next Generation Plenary at IAC, we had a panel on space and the arts, and we got such a diverse set of applicants. It was wonderful. There was someone who was thinking about, choreographing the first like ballet dance in microgravity, because she's a ballerina and she's also a space scientist. Then there was another individual, they were thinking about, different like bio sort of sensors in space, but then like the artistic representation around the work they do, because they think about space habitats. So they're like a space architect in some ways. And I really loved looking at that diversity of talent and people who had this duality. And I think as humans, we have this duality. Like we may have a scientific sort of technical part to our brain, but we also have an artistic, this part of us that dreams and that imagines and creates and wants to create a better world. And they have to come together, I think. And I think this bridge is being built, especially in the space sector. I didn't even know the wealth of opportunities that were being created, often by people themselves, like, public relations in space, or like marketing for space companies or space artists. And the work they do, it plays such a critical role in inspiring the broader, public beyond just our little bubble.
It's a bit similar to what I mentioned earlier. It's about how the aerospace industry is portrayed in the media, and this would include movies like Star Trek, any form of arts, whether it's visual arts, painting, music, movies, etc. And it's very important, you know, for people growing up and young people to be able to see a path for themselves and to see a place for themselves in whatever they're looking at. So if, you know, they watch a movie, whether it's Star Trek or something else, and they see a very diverse cast doing very interesting things, and the movies make it exciting and fun, I think, wow, yeah, maybe I could do that. And so I think representation in the media is very important.
So as I sit here in the medical bay of the Starship Cerritos, I really hope that you enjoyed this conversation outside in with some of the members of the 2022 20 under 35 cohort. I enjoyed them immensely. There was really too much content to fit into one video, but I do hope you learn more about them by visiting 20under35.com. That's 20, the number 20, under 35, the number 35.com. There, you can also download a nomination form for the 2023 cohort or for the 2023 Mentor of the Year. And I hope I see you on October 18th, 2023 in Mountain View, California, where we will have the Future Leaders Celebration to meet this year's cohort. With that, thank you so much for visiting with me. And I hope you've had a lot of food for thought outside in.